So, hello guys, welcome back to the Coaching Corner with me, Pascal, and on the other end, the very intelligent Jess Terrier and the very beautiful and handsome guy, it's Ryan Solomon. It's normally the other way around, isn't it?
I'll take beautiful and handsome. That's all right.
You don't want to be smart. You just want to be handsome.
I'll take smart.
Yep.
Yeah. Why not both at the same time? Yeah. Oh, then you have the secret weapon and the power to rule
there,
the
Pascal.
world. Yeah, I don't think that this is me anymore. Just getting too old. I just stood in front of the mirror and was just looking at myself and seeing like the gray hair is actually getting not just gray, but really just white. And I'm just like, oh shit, I'm getting old. I'm seriously getting old now.
No, it's just a nice, handsome, mature look for you.
Yeah.
Think about a George Clooney version. George Clooney is really hot.
There you go.
And after all, what I really do like is actually that people are calling me Papa P. I really do like that. Like, honestly, every single time someone is saying that, I'm just like, yes, you are in the trenches.
Yes.
So, yeah, guys, first and foremost, how are you guys doing? And where are you right now? And I mean, Ryan, it's quite obvious where you're at, right?
I'm in my basement.
Yeah, that's
America.
the typical view. So when people are watching your big three, this is always the environment, right? So you're at home. What about you, Jess? I've seen over on your Instagram that you are walking around in the mountains.
Yeah,
have you become a hermit?
Not at the moment, but I am at my brother's, which is close to the Swiss border in France. But I'm in France for now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah, it looked beautiful. And I mean, walking around there. So right now, though, you are transitioning out of a cutting phase into a gaining phase. So expending that type of energy, now going into a gaining phase, holy shit, then you have some calories to play with, don't you?
I eat so much food. It's incredibly pleasuring. It's really good.
Yeah,
I went from like 1,500 calories to 2,400, roughly.
How many uppos do you have then? Is
How
it
many
like
what?
more
Oh.
Uppo ice creams? Do
We
you
don't
have
have
per
them
day?
in France.
Oh,
we don't
God.
have them.
What is wrong with Macron?
A lot of things. So many things. But Oppo not being in the supermarkets is the first thing.
The government should have taken care of that, like especially during the lockdown, to stock things up there. But yeah, anyway, without totally deviating from what we originally intended to talk about. So this podcast should be all about, as you may have seen on the title, probably already, it's all about willpower, motivation, and also adherence overall. So to give you a little bit of an overview of what it is that I'm referring to when it comes to that, and give you a little bit of a background story, is that many people, in my opinion, they are relying on willpower and motivation too much when it comes to their training and nutritional endeavors. I think it always gets then better over time once knowledge kicks in, once this becomes more of a habit and they are identifying with the task at hand. But I see it all the time that people are then coming into training and nutrition and they are just like, okay, I have one goal, and that drives them. But once that goal may not be accomplished or something deviates them from that goal in it for itself, they are losing all of the drive. When something is actually challenging them in achieving that goal or journey, such as, for example, Christmas holidays, typical phenomenon that many people are falling off the wagon during Christmas, not because of the diet, but more so due to social events. Bodybuilders are most of the time very, very structured and they love their routine. And now there are so many hurdles actually being put in their way. Like a family event here, then the colleagues are getting together. You're kind of forced to drink when you don't really have the confidence in saying no, right? And you are so demanding, so concentrated and focused on your goal that you're then actually giving in. And making room for these kind of things will actually take the willpower and also then the motivation away. And this is where so many people are then also falling off of the wagon. So before we are then delving into the adherence kind of thing, I think that it is good that we are first and foremost covering one of these two things. So maybe we will start things off with motivation. And what's your take on why people may be relying too much on motivation? What you think the pros and the cons are of motivation. And Jess, if you want to start things off, then go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. I think motivation is a big part because primarily of social media. You see all of those motivational quotes, motivational videos, and people tend to think that it's easier to rely on motivation instead of hard work and consistency. And yeah, I think social media plays a huge role. It's a lot of positive things, but it's sadly maybe a lot of negative things as well. So yeah, I think you don't really need to rely on motivation. And I'm not saying having some motivation is bad or inspiration from people, but I think relying solely on motivation, it's not going to do the job in the long term. Because if you build habits and you're consistent with the habits, the days where you feel like not going to the gym, not dieting, you know that you have this consistency and those habits built, that they're probably gonna help you more than motivation to get through the day, get through your training. And I think another thing, as you mentioned, goals. Once people attained their goals and they don't have anything left, it's so easy to fall off the wagon just because you don't have anything to work towards you. And that's when you have to be really aware of the hard work that you're putting in, because you want it to be consistent. You want to put the work to actually live from that lifestyle and not just rely on motivation towards one goal. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, absolutely. And I think that this is a good point that you're bringing up. And when people are achieving that goal, that nothing is in front of them anymore, and perhaps then they don't have the drive to keep going anymore. And what goal was it then? If you just like tick off that box and then you are completely throwing it away, was it really then worth it to just achieve that goal? Another perspective I just want to bring up, though, is the contrarian perspective on that. What if you are never able to achieve that goal because the goal was maybe not realistic? So, for example, we never know what our genetic potential is, right? And you could be someone who's growing very rapidly, but then it stalls out very rapidly as well. Or you could be someone who's growing over a long period of time, but then you have to be patient, right? And then if you start things off very young and very early, and of course we are a little bit more naive when we start things off, and also especially when we are younger, especially males, right, Ryan? Probably
Absolutely.
Also due to risk-taking, frontal cortex and all that kind of stuff, right? When it comes to these kind of things, we have most of the time completely screwed expectations of what is possible for us. Sometimes we can easily exceed that. Sometimes we will never get there. So if we are just driven by that image in our head and we are working towards that goal, and it's always like that carrot in front of ourselves and we will never reach that goal, then the question needs to be asked, like, will we continue pursuing our goals, or will we just give up? Right? And this is just like a contrarian perspective to the things that you brought up, Jess, because I think it's worth noting as well that it's not just about achieving that goal and then stopping, but also what if you never achieve that goal? Will you then stop as well?
I think it's really interesting, and I'm happy you brought that up. I bring that up a lot with my clients when I tell them the end goal shouldn't be the only thing that you have inside. You have to find enjoyment throughout the whole journey, because if you never reach that goal, at least you're building habits around training, around nutrition, and you're actually enjoying the journey towards that goal. Because if you think reaching that goal is your only source of happiness, I think it's kind of fucked and sad.
Yeah.
Because you have to find enjoyment all the way. I know that the first time I dieted down for my show, it was really hard to find enjoyment because I wasn't leaning out as fast as possible, as fast as I thought I could, or I would. And this time around, when I dieted down, I actually paused and, like smell the roses and just enjoy the whole journey, and not just, oh, I'm going to get shredded, but between where you are and that goal, it can be a long time. And if you're just thinking about that goal and you're not enjoying the actual journey to get there, that's your whole life you're kind of wasting because you're just thinking about the end. Yeah, I think it's kind of sad.
Yeah, what's your take on that, Ryan?
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of when people are going through a gaining phase, they can't wait to be cutting. And then when people are going through a cutting phase, they can't wait to be eating more food
Yeah.
and going through a gaining phase. And
Has been me in the past, that's for sure.
Yeah, totally. It's that constant kind of mind fuck of whatever phase you're in, you kind of want to be in that other phase, and you're not really trying to embrace the phase you're in. Whether it's a cutting phase, you're trying to look at the positives of, okay, I get to be leaner here. I get to do this, and this. And then in a gaining phase, it's like, okay, I get to eat more food. I can have more flexibility in my life, stuff like that. And trying to find those positives of either phase. And on this note, I remember hearing like a few years ago, somebody say something along the lines of, even if I don't make any more kind of muscle gains the rest of my training career, I would still train. And when I heard it at that time, it kind of was like, really? You would do that? And I didn't understand. But at this point, it's like, absolutely. When you can do this for reasons outside of just that external goal of growing muscle and stuff like that, and you do it for the benefits of you lift weights and then you feel better the entire rest of the day, or it just kind of sets up your entire day and your life just feels like it's in order when you're training and doing that sort of thing. I think that when you can look at those other benefits rather than just that single external goal, which it's cool to grow muscle and get stronger and that sort of thing too. I think that is a fine goal to have. But when you can also look at those other benefits and really start enjoying the process, like you said, then you can really do this for different reasons. And then if you ever get injured or something like that, it will keep you kind of in the gym trying to do something rather than kind of throwing up your hands and that sort of thing.
No, absolutely. And just on that note as well, I think for people, it's very important to have, of course, some kind of drive to get into changing something, because otherwise they would never take action. We are seeing it each and every single day. When you are talking with your aunt, for example, yeah, I should lose actually some weight, but, right, there's always a but, that ambivalent state, because the current situation is not as bad as it could be, and that's why the will of taking action is actually not exceeding then, of course, to take action. So in that instance, of course, motivation can be a good trigger and catalyst at first, but then over time, it should actually be less and less important because other things are developing as well. You are evolving as a person, right? When I started things off, of course, I had one specific thing in mind, and this is actually to look better, right? There's nothing wrong about that. And that goal is, of course, still there because this is bodybuilding after all. So you're building something, but this is exactly what it is. You are building something. You're not finishing a project or so, right? So you're working basically on a never-ending project. That is what it is. And thus, we should never be fixated then on one specific outcome. And also, how demanding would it be for us to always then seek for some kind of motivator? Because what was my motivator and driver like 7 years ago is definitely not my driver and motivator nowadays anymore. And you can't just like rely on that. Something like in a movie, for example, where that one single person who wants to seek revenge, right? Yeah, he killed my parents when I was younger, and now the last 20 years I trained to actually get revenge, and now is the time, right, to fulfill my prophecy and actually my plan. This isn't what it's like in real life. You don't have that in front of yourself where it's like, okay, this is this sole motivator for me. Perhaps there are exceptions to that, but I would say like when it comes to our realm, this is hardly ever the case. And then we have to acknowledge that motivation will just go out of the window at some point. You can't just always have that as kind of your parachute when you are just like floating in air. There will be times where training will suck, where nutrition will suck, right? And if you don't have that motivation then anymore, what can you then rely on? If you haven't built some kind of solid habits, or if you haven't created kind of an identity around the training or nutrition, or that this has become part of you. This is something that I always try to teach every one of my athletes, that this is something that you want to accomplish. It's not the goal of having a six-pack or so, or stepping on stage, but the goal is actually making this part of who you are. And this can, of course, change in 10 or 20 years. We are all evolving as a person, and our preferences change, things that we do like change, things that we dislike change, of course, right? So that doesn't mean that you, for the rest of your life, this is your identity. But in this state and stage of your life as well, you want to not rely on the willpower or the motivation, but more so on who it is that you are, in order then to just like tick off the boxes and do what you're supposed to be doing. And the best example of what everyone has gone through right now, which was kind of a test of time, was the lockdown situation. This just was a proof of whether you really want it or not. And this is not me being like that hardcore dude. Yeah, do you really want it? So prove it to me now, right? No, it's more like, okay, hey, it sucked training from at home. I didn't like it at all in comparison to being at a gym. But I wasn't complaining about it because it was still giving me more joy and happiness to do this, even though that it sucks, than not training at all. And this is where then the identity comes into play. This is just who I am. And in order to just like prove it to, not prove it to me, but in order to fulfill me and to be myself, I needed to still go through that shitty phase, even though that it was shitty, but still it fulfilled me more than not doing it at all. And I think that is very, very important for people to acknowledge of like, okay, where am I at right now? Am I solely relying on willpower and motivation, or am I already at a point where it's already part of who I am? And if it's not, then I would very much recommend anyone in actually working on that, if that's truly what you want. And if it's not, then perhaps the time that you are investing into that is not warranted in actually investing it into that journey, because perhaps there are other things that will fulfill you more for the rest of your life, because other things will become part of your identity, right? Training and nutrition, it may be fun, but if you don't really see yourself doing it for the rest of your life, I don't know how valuable it is for you. Because we all know that from like work or so, if it's something that we simply don't enjoy, so nothing about it, will we really stick to that? Probably not, right? Now I've made all of my hobbies so far into occupations. And it's kind of an illusion for many people, like saying, okay, yeah, you have to find something that you love, and then you will not be working for the rest of your life. That is absolutely bullshit. It's an illusion. It would be lovely if that's the case, but it's not, because every single job has also some sides to it that aren't enjoyable. And especially when it's a hobby of yours. A hobby is just like fun and dandy, right? But if there are some certain things that you then need to take care of, you have some obligations, right? Other people are relying on you. That then can actually kill the joy about it. And this is the same thing then, if you decide to actually do training and nutrition, and you now know that it is a long-term game, then you have to also come to the terms and realization like, okay, am I even willing to put in the work and effort in order to accomplish what I want to accomplish? Or is it more so just an illusion I set for myself, and that is not even realistic to accomplish in that short period of time, right? And then once again, it's better perhaps spend somewhere else. So yeah, I know a lot of things that I brought up, so I don't know where you want to continue touching on one specific point, Jess.
Hi guys, Steve here. Just wanted to take a moment of your time to remind you of the Revive Stronger member site. Inside you'll find a thriving forum, a growing exercise library, presentations, research reviews and courses. If you want to get involved, sign up via the description.
Yeah, I'll go ahead with the pressure towards bodybuilding. I think there's so much pressure that there shouldn't be so much pressure around liking bodybuilding. Maybe it's not your thing, and that's okay. There are so many sports, so many hobbies. It shouldn't have to be solely about bodybuilding. Obviously, we talk about bodybuilding because that's our thing. But as you said, if you're going to invest time and money, and it can be a little bit time consuming, you have to be willing to give it dedication to actually make it work. And I don't think a lot of people think that through enough. They'll be like, oh, this looks fun. I'm just going to do bodybuilding and I'm just going to build a great body and I'm going to get into training and nutrition. And, oh, maybe I'll be an online coach because everybody's doing it and that sounds fun and you can work from everywhere. And yeah, a lot of people have this flawed idea that bodybuilding is always fun. But it's not. If you really want to make it work, you have to, learn about it and you have to actually enjoy learning about it. And I think that's a huge part that people miss on. It's also about education. You have to be willing to educate yourself towards that or hire a coach that's going to help you out. And yeah, it's a lot of investment, whether it would be money, time, effort. But yeah, you don't have to like bodybuilding. If you really don't enjoy it, you don't have to do it. That's as simple as that. And yeah, I think there's a kind of social pressure around that needs to not be.
I think this has also mostly to do with a cult-like behavior in the fitness industry, that most of the time groups are being built, and just human nature, we want to be part of a group. So if we are then interested into something, right, we get into that realm, and perhaps we have somewhat of a passion there. We are truly, genuinely interested in just becoming better. Then we probably are also seeking for some kind of confirmation or some kind of a group. And in order to appeal to that group, we are also then kind of transforming ourselves or kind of warping who we really are just to participate and be part of that group. And this is, of course, then especially holding true here in the fitness industry. And funny enough, like yesterday or so, everyone was posting about it when it comes to Gymshark and them having posted like a overweight model in their clothing, and people were just like going mad about it. The comments that you've seen there, they were just like crazy, right? I have to say though, when I saw that picture, I was also having my thoughts about it, right? Some negative thoughts, some positive thoughts. But the thing is, I was absolutely biased due to what my picture and my image in my head is, what bodybuilding is. And I think that this holds true to that as well. Once you are part, or once you are identifying with a group, then it's very, very hard to actually still stay rational-headed and also just stay objective. And when you are then actually drawn into that realm, it's hard to then still just be like, yeah, no, bodybuilding is fun. And actually, yeah, let's just say the UK bodybuilding scene is very, very like focused. Let's put it that way. If you're part of that one, right? I think it's very hard to still then be like, no, I want to have a couple of drinks at the weekend and stuff, right? I think it's very hard due to peer pressure, even if it's intentional peer pressure or the peer pressure that you perceive it to be, because you just want to appeal for the entirety of the group, right? So I think that this is also one aspect that needs to be taken into consideration. But what I also think that, and this is where I also wanted to draw it towards to, is just the raw reality of what commitment and effort you need to put into the entire thing in order to get something out of it. I think that many, many people think, all right, I want to change something about my body. I want to look a little bit better. Maybe I want to be a bodybuilder, but in reality, it's more the thought and the final image they have set for themselves in their head that it appeals to them than the actual journey. And we kind of touched on it already, but not to that extensive of a thing. But I don't know if you guys read How to Not Give a Fuck. There's a lot of not giving a fuck from Mark Manson, the book. There's a section where he talks about like him always wanting to become a rock star. So he always imagined him to stay on stage or be on stage and playing in front of thousands of people. And it was so compelling to him, just the idea of being on stage and playing in front of thousands of people. Then he started actually practicing a little bit, and he found it already there to be very challenging just to learn the instrument. Let alone the thought of spending endless nights just on the ground without actually having a hotel room, without getting paid for playing in front of like one or two people. And basically this resonated so much with me because, and also the entire book resonated so much with me because I had the feeling that he's basically talking about my life in so many aspects. And this was me in the band. I started at the age of 16 with a band, right? And then I had always the thought of, yeah, I will become a rock star. And I invested like 8 to 9 years, and I was playing gigs in front of sometimes only like 1 or 2 people. Right? And you invested so much time and effort. And after a couple of years, I realized that the joy I had at the beginning was completely gone. And I thought that the only thing that kept me going was the thought of actually the end goal. But I lost completely the love and the willpower and adherence for the entire thing, simply because I realized that the way was so much harder than I first anticipated. And I also think that this is the case for many people who get into training and nutrition, that they have a screwed perception of what is achievable for them in a shorter period of time, that the anticipation for them is completely warped from what reality actually is. So what I mean by that is they think like, okay, I can get away with training 4 days out of the week, 60 minutes or so, right? And this for the next 2-3 years, and I look freaking fantastic. And most of the time, that simply isn't what reality is. Most of the time, unfortunately, if you really want to change your body, for the majority of people, and especially those who are now being claimed that they have good genetics, let's say Steve, for example, right? He has already committed like, I think now 8 or 9 years or even 10 years or so for a complete transformation. And that holds true for so many people who are now claimed to actually be the genetic elite in the natural bodybuilding realm. They have already invested like 10 to 15 years that people haven't seen at first. This is not uncommon. And people see those images and think like, yeah, this can be me in 3 years when I invest just a little bit of time. And once they are actually being faced with reality, they are being hit hard. And this is then where many people drop out of the entire journey because they feel overwhelmed by it, or they think like, okay, I need to invest even more, when in reality, they haven't really invested a lot. It was just like they thought they have invested a lot because their expectations of what it is that is required in actually getting there was completely screwed. Whereas when you take a look at someone like Steve, for example, he puts so much time and effort into that. So much time and effort, right? And this is something that many people don't really see. And this is also then, once again, where many people just fall off the wagon because their expectations were just like completely off. And most of the time, the expectations of what it is, what they had to put into the entire thing in order to get a certain result.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's easy to look at, somebody like Steve or something like that and not realize how much like time and effort that he dedicates to this, like twice daily training, like a decade of really kind of solid training and nutrition, having everything kind of on point. I think Steve's mentioned before that he's like never even had like a binge or something like that. And he's been completely on point with like, I think his MyFitnessPal streak is like a decade or something like that. It's crazy. And I think that a lot of people don't realize that, hey, for most people to look like Steve Hall, it's going to come at a very significant cost in your life. And it's very important to consider, okay, what's important to me here? What do I want to get out of it? And if you want to be a competitive bodybuilder, then that's going to come at a cost, and there's no off switch for this thing. Like you're going to be on most of the time with your nutrition, paying attention to your sleep, making sure that you're your life is kind of structured around your training and getting your protein feedings in, like that's kind of what it's going to be, especially during periods of time to where you're leading up into a competition and stuff like that. And it's also okay if that's not your goal and you are okay with, hey, over the next few years, I want to gain 5 to 10 pounds of muscle. If that's your goal and you're just kind of starting out, then you can be much more kind of chill with things. But I think that's rarely someone's goal. And it's like, hey, I want to look like Steve Hall in 2 years. And it's like, for one, like that takes a decade to build something like that for most people. And then for two, that comes at a very big cost. So absolutely.
Many people can't even comprehend that. And even I have a hard time sometimes thinking about what can be achieved in like 5 to 10 years. Because people are very bad at long-term thinking and what long-term outcomes can be and look like. This is also like a typical human psychological test of like, okay, I can give you now, for example, $100 today, or I give you like $500 in just a year. What would you rather do? The majority of people take the $100, right? It's just like they have a hard time comprehend and just like think about what can be in the future. Because also we can't really predict what is going to happen with us as well, right? So we rather seek short-term gratification and what is now instead of actually doing something for the long term, especially if we can't really predict the outcome as well. Thing is just like, I think that once again, the baseline understanding is just like completely off. It's like when you want to get rich, to put it that way, perhaps it's a little bit easier to understand. How likely is it then to get rich in just like 1 to 2 years? Is it possible? Absolutely. With the right amount of luck, especially, right? But how likely is it? Very unlikely, right? But how likely is it in 10 years, especially when you are young, right? And you can take bigger risks, which can basically also then directly correlate to just being able to recover better, doing more in the gym, being at a better hormonal profile as well, right? There's a direct correlation there in that example. So how likely is it then? The likelihood is much, much more increased, right? How likely is it then in 20 years? Very likely, but only, and everything that I said here, only likely when you are doing the things that then increases your chances of getting there. If you want to actually get rich, right, then you have to probably be very frugal. You have to actually work a shit ton, probably 7 days out of the week, right? You have to be very intelligent and smart about money, and probably you have to invest as well, right? And the same goes for training, right? If you don't put in the work that is necessary and required, you will never get there. And if you then think of like, okay, I can get rich if I'm just like working from Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Sometimes I'm taking some days also thereof, right? And at the end of the day, I'm watching Netflix for 4 hours simply because I like it, right? And then you are complaining about not actually getting rich. It is like you had a completely wrong idea of what it takes. This is the same thing, right? If you really think that you will become absolutely freaking jacked and only then putting in like four training sessions of 60 minutes for the rest of your career or so, right? And then also alongside with that, your sleep is shit, your stress management is shit, your fatigue management is shit. You on the weekends, you have a couple of drinks every single weekend, right? Sometimes throughout the week, sometimes you're binging, sometimes you're in a caloric deficit. Do you really think that you are increasing the likelihoods of actually getting there? And this is something that I commonly see. When then people are saying and dropping out of the entire endeavor and saying like, this is taking over my life, then it was just because their baseline understanding of what is required in order to get there was completely off. They thought they are committing a lot of time to that. But in reality, in comparison to the ones who truly commit a lot of time and effort to those, this is just like nothing in comparison to that. And this is also reminding me of the fact what I think, who was it, Lane Norton or someone said at some point, about passion, or I think Ryan Doris even said it about passion. If you always pretend you're passionate about a specific topic and you meet someone who's truly passionate about it, you will make a fool of yourself. And this is the same thing. I think that when you think that you are already committing a lot, and in reality it isn't, and you are then faced or meeting someone like, let's say an RFPB pro, where everything just revolves around like training and nutrition, like everything, the entire day. Are you then very much like confused as to why you haven't matched what you've wanted to accomplish? And do you then really can you really say that it then takes over your life? I don't know. What do you think, Jess?
How are you going to call me?
Steph at first, but Jess.
Yeah, I think it comes down to having realistic expectations, and that's something that most people don't have. And it's okay. Like, I'm not saying we're not shaming people who are only willing to put in like 4 hours per week into training. If that's what you want to give to bodybuilding and that's what you can give efficiently, that's okay. You don't have to give more than you want to, but you have to be okay with the fact that you're not going to grow as fast and not everything is going to be as efficient as you want it to be. I think realistic expectations is a big thing. And that's something I bring up with my clients in consultations all the time. And I tell them, I have clients that they want to compete next year, but they've been training for 6 months. And I tell them, if you don't want to look like a fool on stage, we're going to have to grow muscle first. And we're going to have to equip you with some tools into dieting properly, training properly. And it's going to take time and it's going to take education. You can't just jump into a cutting phase or prep if you've never done a proper cutting phase before, things like that. So I think it's really important to emphasize realistic expectations with clients. And I remember Steve posted a transformation picture of one of his clients not a long time ago, and people went crazy over it, saying things that really disturbed me, like, oh, that's all you could achieve in 2 or 3 years or whatever was the amount of time between the pictures. And I'm like, this is reality. This is exactly what it actually looks like. Not everybody's going to look like Steve in 2 years. And if that's what you think, this is flawed thinking, because this is not how it works. And it's really disturbing to have people trying to better themselves and us showing the work that they've put in and having people comment negative things about that, because this is what it looks like. And yeah, it's just really sad to see people put other people down because their realistic expectations are flawed. And that's the problem. It's the people who comment that have wrong realistic expectations about what it actually takes or what it actually looks like in the end.
Yeah. Can I say something to that before I'm forgetting about it? And that is, absolutely, I wholeheartedly agree. And the problem is that it's kind of a vicious cycle then, because it enforces the people who are posting these transformation pictures to either manipulate the pictures to make them look better, with lighting, with Photoshop, with whatever, right? With angles and stuff like that, with posing, whatever it is, to manipulate the transformation picture to make it actually look better than it really was. And or it enforces them to only post the highlight reel. And that is a very vicious cycle, because if that enforces them, it just generates a false expectation in return for the audience. And then it's just like they are applying to someone like a coach or so, and they think that they can accomplish that. And it's just like it ends up spinning their wheels like everyone, right? And it spirals down a very, very detrimental path, which is unfortunate. It very much is unfortunate.
Yeah, and I think people forget that this is a business for most coaches online. They don't do that as a hobby. They make money out of that. So of course, if they can enhance the pictures and if they can make them look better, if they can sell themselves that way, most of the time people are going to do it. Or they're just going to, even if they don't transform the pictures, they're going to put the best transformations they have. They're going to put the most the best clients, I'm not finding the word, but they're going to put like the wow transformation,
Yeah.
the really selling factor, the thing that's going to be like, oh, this looks like a great coach because this transformation is awesome and I'm going to want to work with him. But yeah, it's a business. Of course, people are going to show most of the time the best of the best, but it's not like that most of the time. It's just not. And
Yeah, it's like when I don't know how much makeup you're wearing, Jess, but I know that I do a lot, and that's why whenever I'm seeing an ad outside in the city, I'm going to the shopping center and I'm actually purchasing that. I'm not expecting to look like the Victoria's Secret model, right? And this is basically what people are then thinking once they are applying for something like that, because they saw like a picture of a transformation picture and thought like, yeah, this is what I want to achieve as well. And maybe you will actually look great by the end of it, but chances are maybe you will not. Right, especially if your endeavor is also to build muscle mass, not just like shred down. Because the thing is, what we also know, like, yeah, everyone can look quite impressive after like 12 weeks of a cutting phase or so, if they really put in the work and effort. But that doesn't really tell us a lot whether this was a pleasant journey, whether they have actually learned something about themselves, about the principles, etc., and whether they are a better and more happy human being now than they were before, right? And this is also one of the reasons why Steve and I have such a hard time actually posting before and after pictures, because it never tells you the true transformation that has taken place. And that is actually taking place up here. Each and every single one can get anyone lean. And this is something that many of the fucking magazines are actually proving, right? Like these women magazines, lose 50 pounds in 1 week. Sometimes there's actually something to it, right? Water manipulation, carb manipulation, all that kind of jazz, right? So anyone can get anyone lean. There's no magic about that. But getting someone lean in a sustainable and healthy manner, and then also really changing their body over a longer period of time, like gaining muscle mass with a lower body fat percentage in a healthy, with a healthy situation, and also in an educational manner, so that the person actually has something for the rest of their lives, right? This is actually more so the art of it, I think. And this is hard to accomplish because you're then dealing with first and foremost human beings, and they have expectations, they have pre-biases. And because of that, it's then hard to sometimes deal with a client who has these images in their head and has these ideals in their head. And then if they can't be fulfilled, sometimes you simply can't help these individuals. And that is so unfortunate, but it is what it is, right? But this is most of the time then also just like based off the things that we talked about, that they rely too much on willpower. They rely too much on motivation. And also they had wrong expectations to begin with of what is achievable and realistic in a shorter period of time or overall, right?
Hey, Pascal here. I just quickly wanted to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we put a huge emphasis on the personal aspect of our coaching. And if you want to take your physique and knowledge to the next level, hit the link in the description below.
So Ryan, go ahead.
I was just going to ask a follow-up question. Is there anything in particular that you like to do with clients or that you talk about with clients to try to, I don't know, set those expectations a little bit better? Like for me, it's a little bit tricky because it's like, I don't want to discourage someone. And right now when they're signing up for a coach, we're kind of in that honeymoon phase to where it's like, yeah, everything's great. I'm so pumped. I'm ready to fucking get after this. And, I think that we can use that motivation to kind of get the ball rolling. But if the expectation is off from the start, then they could get really discouraged a couple of weeks in. So how do you kind of approach that?
Jess, do you want to go ahead first?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I'm usually very straightforward. I don't know if it's a French characteristic, but I like to be straightforward with people, and it hasn't done me wrong so far because I do have successful consultations, but I do tell them it's not going to be easy. It's going to take effort. It's going to take work, and you're not going to look like Instagram model in a year. And yeah, I think it's tricky, as you said. It's really, really tricky. It's a lot of psychological work to make them understand that realistic expectations are different from social media expectations, but I try to emphasize what they're going to gain in the meantime while they're not attaining their dream body or whatever. And I really try to stay away from dream body or um, anything that sounds like that, because it's just not like me. But I really try to emphasize you're gonna be educated. You can ask me any questions. I will try to help you. Yeah, I think and emphasizing on what they're gonna gain instead of not getting to their end goal directly is really important. And it comes down to even selling yourself and your abilities to help people without having that expectation or that end goal being the only result. And I really, really tell them every day, it's about the journey. It's really not about the end goal. You have to find pleasure. You have to find enjoyment throughout the whole thing. Because if you're dragging your feet every day to go to the gym just because you want abs, that's just not going to cut it. You're at some point you're just going to burn out, and psychologically your body is just not, your mind is just not going to follow your body. So yeah, really emphasizing what they're going to gain during the journey.
Yeah, for me, I would love to now be the greatest coach and saying like, yeah, I have these methods that I'm using for my clients. But as you guys may know me, I'm transparent and I don't. I have no strategies when it comes to that, because I'm also wary of the fact that I'm dealing with individuals. Some people need to have someone by their side that is supportive. Some people just need someone by their side who just guides them, right? And yeah, some people are perhaps even some of both at the same time. Based off of that, I'm just building a little bit of an inner rapport for me, getting to know that individual as best as I can. Sometimes it simply doesn't work out, right? Because there's not enough time then that you have worked together, and you're still dealing with a human. And that also means that sometimes you simply don't get along that well. Even in the initial consultation, everything was fine, right? We all know that person who is friendly, who's kind, right? For example, we met them at work, but it takes a long time to actually open up, or maybe it never happens. There's always kind of a barrier in between. Sometimes that is also the case, but I'm trying my very best to actually give my clients also the impression that I have only one interest in mind, and that is actually helping them to the best of my abilities. Because I have no other interest, because this is my occupation. This is like Jess said, someone is actually putting their trust in me and paying me money. And because of that, this is of course also my business, my reputation. And that's why I also have the biggest interest in actually helping them to the best of my abilities, right? And that also then sometimes means that I will tell them like upfront how it is. Sometimes though, it's also like you do, Ryan, that I don't want to damper their motivation or drive overall when they are super pumped, right? I want to actually spark that as well and be like, yeah, this is great, this is cool, come on, let's do this. And I'm most of the time anyway a more positive individual, I would say. Whether this is something that how other people are perceiving that's a different question. But yeah, most of the time I'm trying to take advantage of that and be like, yeah, this is great. Come on, let's take advantage of that. But at the same time, I also try over time planting seeds in their head in the sense of like, okay, this is a long-term thing. Come on, let's do this. Let's not change things up too drastically, because I also know from now the experience with myself, with seeing with Steve, seeing with the majority of my athletes, that the majority of people won't see significant changes in a shorter period of time. And I also know that changing things up too frequently is a sure wayfire of just like spinning your wheels. And in not changing things up too drastically, I hope most of the time that they are starting to embrace the process instead of always chasing the new shiny gem that is out there. Right? Because if you always change things up and you make it sound as if you know what you're talking about and they don't understand it, but it sounds great, it sounds sciencey or so, then you are selling them bullshit. And this is definitely not what I want, because we know that the true a key to success is consistency. It isn't changing things up too drastically. And I want them to get to a point where they are, where this becomes a habit of them. And also it's becoming, again, which I talked about early in the podcast, part of their identity. And then they are starting to embrace just the journey. And then they are also able to just like, I don't need to change things up too drastically or too frequently, because now it's more about, okay, I'm continuously trying to challenge myself and getting better. And this is only possible if we also have some constant variables there that we don't change up too drastically, other than us progressing. And that is the true change that is then happening, for example, on paper. So once again, I don't really have like true methods in getting there. It's more of a way of figuring out the personality or the type of person you're dealing with, and then trying to just convince them over time with a little bit of priming, and telling them on a repeated basis of like, okay, this is what we need to focus on. This is what I need you to do. And then actually making that part of who they are. And hopefully that works. And sometimes it simply doesn't work out, because for some people that is perhaps not the right way to go about it, right? And it's like you are always so I don't know, you're some kind of a mechanic, right? And each and every single car is a little bit built differently. Some cars you just know very well, and some cars you've never worked on, and the methodologies or the things that work on that one car doesn't really work on this car, right? And you always have to then figure out. And with some cars, it will take you a very long time, and before you actually have the chance of fixing it, the owner comes and just takes it away from you because it took too long of a time, for example. And yeah, it's unfortunate, but it would be the loveliest thing, of course, if you have all the time in the world as a coach. But this is not what it is, because you as a coach, you have also one thing, or the biggest obligation of yours is that you are a problem solver, right? You are being hired as a problem solver. And if you don't solve that problem quickly enough, and what quick means is, of course, individual dependent, then, of course, they are seeking a different solution. And sometimes it's earlier than you wish for, but yeah, it is what it is. But Ryan, you haven't really said what your methods are, so go ahead, buddy.
Well, I think I'm very similar to you guys, to where I don't have just one cookie cutter approach to anybody. And for me, I totally like avoiding conflict. I will sugarcoat the fuck out of things, and I don't put things like super blunt to people. And I think that could be both good and bad. I think that a lot of people don't respond well to that blunt feedback, but I also think that some people kind of need to hear it every once in a while. So I think it's finding that line of how to put this in a way that it comes through to where it's like, hey, we need to kind of get our shit together, but it's also not just saying, hey, we need to get our shit together here. So that can absolutely be tricky. And I think that similar to what you guys said is like over time, kind of helping them build some of that competence in the gym to where they kind of understand what they're doing, and they kind of build. I think Menno Henselman's talked about in our last podcast about how often one of a really good predictor of adherence is when someone builds up a lot of autonomy, they build up their competence in something, and they also have that kind of relatedness. So they're kind of a part of a group. They start kind of identifying, like what we've been talking about this entire time, identifying with, hey, this is kind of what I do. It starts to set that expectation of other people around them kind of expect this from them. And they're no longer the person that, hammers a 12-pack of beer and an entire pizza, and they start to become the person that goes to the gym and does this sort of thing. And I think that over time, they can absolutely build that adherence. And I think it's also tricky too, to where I don't want it to be like a cop-out as a coach, to where it's like, you're not getting results, but these things take time and stuff like that. Like I want to get them the results as fast as I can, but the reality of this situation is it usually does take quite a bit of time. And yeah, it can definitely be that tricky line to kind of walk there.
Yeah. And you brought up one thing that is sometimes being absolutely upfront isn't the right thing to do. And this is something that I most of the time misinterpret, because I'm very, how should I put it?
German.
German.
I wouldn't say German, but also sometimes I lack the empathy when it comes to these things, the understanding of when something is appropriate to say or not. I wouldn't say that I don't have the feeling for it, right? I still think that I said it in a sensible manner, but still for the person it wasn't. It was still super straightforward and perhaps even inappropriate, right? Whereas for me, in my understanding and my perception, I was already like sugarcoating them, if that makes sense. Yeah. There's also a different understanding, and this is also so important then to get to know the other person. And even then, you are not secured from actually then sometimes stepping over that boundary, even though that you are only acting with good intentions. This is basically what I always try to emphasize with each and every one of my athletes, that when I give them more of a straight talk of like, okay, this is how it is, right? That I always remind them that I'm there for their best interest. And once again, I'm also bringing up the example that I talked about, like, hey, this is also my reputation here. Why should I give you like a hard time? Or why should I keep you from making the best progress possible? Why? I have no interest. This is my business, right? Of course, I want you to have the best results possible, because that also means that my business will benefit in return, right? So if you then put it from that perspective, also bringing a different perspective into play, sometimes they realize like, yeah, shit, that makes sense, kind of. So he doesn't mean it in a personal manner because he doesn't gain anything out of that. But yeah, it's sometimes it's such a hard thing, and actually then giving them like the honest, not just opinion, but also just the true facts of, okay, this is what it is, and we have to now do X, Y, Z in order to move forward. Or, sorry, but this is something that simply doesn't work, and we have perhaps already tried it for a very long time, and I'm trying repeatedly to remind you about, okay, X, Y, Z, and you simply can't get your shit together, perhaps, right? And then it comes to that point where that individual has to swallow perhaps the hard pill, even though that even in that situation I try to still say it in a more friendly manner, right? But still, it's there's a discrepancy of how you perceive things to be easy on someone, and because I would assume that when Steve is communicating something, it would sound completely different than to how I communicate something, right? So you always have like two parties that are communicating. Typical thing of communication, right? You have a sender and a receiver, and then the message in between can even be meant with good intentions, but can pick up very negatively, for example, and then vice versa, right? But also this entire podcast, the things that we talked about, and you mentioned that already, Jess, this is not meant giving the listeners a hard time or just like patting ourselves on the back and be like, yeah, we do things correctly and we are superior. Absolutely not. This is not meant to be or to send this message. For me, it's just like a typical phenomenon I see when it comes to motivation, willpower, and also adherence. And then it ties into something like, for example, realistic expectations. But I also want to send these messages out there to give you the what it's really like, and to maybe give you a wake-up call. And for each and every single listener, I know that many of the things that they don't apply to you, but give it a chance that maybe there is something that applies to you. And if you just brush it off really quickly, then you are perhaps missing the chance of progressing in the future. And I said it in one of my recent Instagram posts. If you receive constructive criticism, this is one of the greatest gifts that you can receive, because now you are being made aware of something that you can change in the future, and that will then make you better. And that holds true in every aspect of life. Jump over your shadow, over your ego, and leave that just there, right? If you like the feedback at first or not, that doesn't really matter. I also sometimes need to swallow at first when I hear something, but then thinking about it more extensively, like after 5 minutes, I realized like, maybe there's something to it. Maybe I need to change something, right? And only then you can actually move forward and progress. And this is also why this podcast was so important to me, that people sit down, they take or listen to that podcast from a different perspective and think about it, whether something applies to themselves, because only then you can actually move forward. Because otherwise, man, your grandma, she will always love you. Whether you're a fat piece of shit, whether you stink, doesn't really matter, right? She will always like, yeah, Ryan, you're such a good boy, right? She will always be like that. But you also need to have people who are telling you how it is and what it is that is going on in order for you to actually move forward. If you always get a pat on your back, you will stay on the same position. But sometimes you need a little bit of a kick in the arse to actually make a step forward. And this is also what I wanted to, or why I wanted to actually talk about that topic, in order to perhaps help some people, moving forward as well.
Yeah, and I think something that's really important that you brought up a few minutes ago, we are dealing with human beings. We're dealing with actual people, not robots. And we are handling we have the ability to change their physical and mental health. And the first rule of any coach, it's do no harm. And I think that's something we need to bring up more, because you see so many bad coaches leaving people with eating disorders, rushing preps to get them shredded and have beautiful before and after pictures. But this is not our job. If you're doing that, it's so unethical. It's so unethical. Like, there are no words for that. And we're dealing with actual people. So yeah, if there's one huge takeaway there also, it's to remember that we're dealing with people with feelings, with emotions, and they most of the time are struggling as well. So yeah, we just need to be aware of that.
Absolutely. Any last words from you, Ryan?
Not a whole lot. I think that you guys put a nice cap on it. I think that it's just important to consider what the actual cost is to what you think that your goals are. And, your goals can change over time, and how much you put into stuff can change over time. And if, like, I didn't even like lifting weights when I first started. So like, if you're not there yet with enjoying this stuff and you're just gonna try it for a little while, that's totally cool. But make sure you give it its fair shake for a little bit and actually give yourself a chance, and you might just end up really enjoying it. And yeah, I think that's all I got.
Yeah. On that note, and then we end the podcast, it's just like, one of the biggest regrets in my life is that I started so many things and I stopped when it got challenging.
Yeah.
So many things that sparked my interest. And then the moment it was actually tough, I was stopping and saying like, no, this isn't for me. And I was actually blaming other reasons and not myself for it. Right? I was blaming like, I don't have the time for it. Or no, this is not me. I don't have the talent for it, or whatever, right? Whatever it is. Don't blame other people for that. If you simply don't like bodybuilding anymore, or simply don't like specific things about it, and you drop out, don't drop out and blame someone else, right? Don't say like, okay, this is taking over my life, because who's in control of your life? It's probably not someone else, right? It is you then. And then you can actually stand up and take action and be like, sorry to actually put it that way, but be just an adult and be like, yeah, I honestly don't like it anymore that much right now. So I won't continue. Hey, that's still better than actually finding a justification in order to end things and not blaming yourself, but blaming so many other things. And then you're just like walking around with a blindfold and being like, yeah, everything is cool, when in reality, the world around you is burning, right? This is an ignorant way of living. And if you do it once, then you do it again with so many other things. And I can just like wholeheartedly say, okay, if that applies to you, just admit it then, right? Because then you can move on to something else and you're not just like stuck in a rock of ignorance or so. So this ended on a very negative note though. So guys, I just leave it here this time very negatively. So guys, thank you very much as always for tuning in for the 4th episode of the Coaching Corner. Thank you guys for coming on. All right. It was a pleasure talking to you about this. As always, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification button. This always helps us for the YouTube algorithm. And what I want to hear now in the comment section below, is there anything that we talked about that applies to you where you are just saying like, okay, this is perhaps something I need to change? I would be very curious to hear whether there is something. So put it down into the comment section below. And if it's not, then tell us as well whether you're already a perfect individual like Cell from Dragon Ball. And yeah, then we leave it here. Guys, any last words then?
Nope.
I'm all good.
I guess I'll speak to you guys soon.
So I'm Steve Hall, founder of Revive Stronger and a coach of Revive Stronger.
My name is Pascal. I'm the co-owner of Revive Stronger and also a coach, of course.
Revive Stronger has probably been going solidly for 3 years, roughly about 3 years.
Revive Stronger, to me, it is becoming kind of my child, my foster child. It's the gathering and getting together of like-minded people.
We've been expanding the coaching team, which is helping us help more people, but each coach can only help a certain number of people.
Right now, it's all over the place. We have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, but there isn't that community aspect behind that.
And so the next step for us is developing a membership site.
So basically, we want to create a family and a community that is then benefiting from another.
A really cool community for people within our little niche is going to be a website.
They will get early access to our podcast.
You can access us, ask us questions.
The community aspect, we have a forum there. You can ask questions, but also you can log your journey.
There's also going to be courses on there.
Courses, presentations on different topics. Discount of past seminar footage. We will log our journey as well. We'll start vlogging.
We're going to have documentaries.
Our entire athletic journey. Furthermore, they get access to an exercise video library.
The exercises that we love for hypertrophy and maximizing hypertrophy, we're going to go through those in depth, telling you how to execute them.
We kept them concise and also mobile friendly so that you can watch them in between your sets.
I'm super excited to grow this community. The amount of value that we're going to be delivering is huge, and I'd love you to be part of it.
You will get so much out of that.
I'll see you inside.